The dust rose like a copper veil on the Oklahoma horizon as Zara Newell stumbled forward, her ankles bound by crude rope that bit into her flesh with each desperate step. The year was 1878, and humanity had never seemed so distant as it did on this sweltering June afternoon. Her once fine blue dress hung in tatters around her slender frame, and her auburn hair, which she'd once worn proudly pinned in elaborate coiffures at Philadelphia society gatherings, now fell in matted tangles across her dirt-streaked face. "Keep moving," growled the man behind her, jabbing her back with the barrel of his rifle. Almost there. Zara didn't know which was worse, the 2 days spent bouncing in the back of a covered wagon with no water, or the knowledge of what awaited her. The slave trade was supposedly abolished, but out here in the territories, human trafficking continued under different names. Indentured servants, they called women like her. Mail-order brides when they were being polite, property when they weren't. Beside her stumbled a child no more than 7 years old, a girl with blonde braids and hollow eyes that had long since run out of tears. The child had been thrown into the wagon with Zara the previous night after a raid on a homestead. Her parents' fate remained unspoken, but Zara could guess from the smoke that had billowed on the horizon behind them. They crested a small rise, and Zara saw what appeared to be a makeshift auction block, a simple wooden platform erected outside a dingy saloon on the outskirts of a town so small it probably didn't appear on any proper maps. A crowd had gathered, men mostly, with hard faces and harder eyes. Ranchers, miners, and drifters, men who'd come west to seek their fortunes and found only hardship and loneliness instead. "Fresh stock," called the man who'd been guiding them at rifle point. He was a wiry fellow with tobacco-stained teeth and eyes that never settled on anything for long. "Gentlemen, a fine Eastern lady with education and breeding, and a young one healthy, strong, can grow up to be a good helper around your homestead." Zara felt bile rise in her throat. She had come west as a governess, lured by promises of good pay and respectable work. Within a week of her arrival in Kansas City, she'd been drugged, robbed, and loaded onto a wagon bound for territories where the law was whatever men with guns said it was. The bidding began, crude and fast. Men shouted numbers, eyeing her like livestock. Zara kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, determined not to let them see her fear. The little girl pressed against her skirts, trembling. Zara wished she could offer comfort, but her hands were bound behind her back. "100 for the woman," called a voice from the back of the crowd. "120, countered another. The auctioneer grinned. "She can read and write, gentlemen. Imagine the letters she could send for you, the books she could read on cold winter nights." The bidding continued until a gruff voice cut through the clamor. 200 for the woman and 50 for the child. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised by the single bid for both. Zara finally looked up, searching for the source of the voice. He stood apart from the crowd, a tall man with broad shoulders and a face weathered by sun and wind. His dark hat shadowed his eyes, but Zara could feel the intensity of his gaze. Unlike the others, he wore no trail dust. His clothes, though simple, were clean. A silver star glinted on his vest. "Marshal Xavier Garrison," muttered someone in the crowd. "Didn't know he was in the market for company." The auctioneer recovered quickly. 250 for the woman alone. "Do I hear more for this fine? I said 200 for the woman and 50 for the child," the marshal repeated, his voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the auctioneer mid-sentence. "Both of them, together." The auctioneer looked to the men who'd brought Zara and the child, who nodded reluctantly. No one wanted to challenge the marshal directly. "Sold," the auctioneer declared, sounding disappointed at the relatively low price. "Both to Marshal Garrison." Zara felt the little girl's grip tighten on her skirt. She didn't know if this development was salvation or merely a different kind of doom. The marshal approached the platform, his spurs making a soft, jingling sound with each deliberate step. He handed a leather pouch to the auctioneer, who counted the money quickly. "Cut their bindings," Marshal Garrison ordered. When no one moved, he drew a knife from his belt and did it himself, slicing through the ropes that bound Zara's wrists. She winced as blood flowed back into her fingers. He then freed her ankles and did the same for the child. "Can you walk?" he asked Zara, his voice softer than she'd expected. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Follow me," he said, turning without waiting to see if they complied. What choice did they have? As they moved away from the auction platform, Zara heard murmurs from the dispersing crowd. "Ain't right," someone grumbled. "Man's got no need for a woman and a child." The marshal seemed not to hear, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He led them down the dusty main street toward a small cabin set back from the other buildings. The little girl stumbled, her exhaustion finally overcoming her fear. Without hesitation, the marshal turned and scooped her up with one arm, continuing his steady pace. The child was too tired to protest. When they reached the cabin, he pushed open the door and gestured for Zara to enter. Inside was simple but clean: a table, chairs, a small stove, a bed in one corner with a curtain that could be drawn for privacy, and what appeared to be a small trundle bed beside it. "Both sleep under my roof tonight," the marshal said, gently setting the child down on a chair. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." Zara stood stiffly by the door, uncertain. Was this a reprieve or merely a delay? "I'm not what you think," Marshal Garrison said, as if reading her thoughts. "I'm not what any of them think either." "Then what are you?" Zara found her voice at last, raspy from thirst and disuse. He removed his hat, revealing a shock of dark hair peppered with gray at the temples. His eyes were a startling blue against his sun-darkened skin. "A man who couldn't stand by and watch what was happening," he said simply. "There's water in that pitcher, food in the cupboard. I'll be back shortly." Without another word, he placed his hat back on his head and left, closing the door behind him, but Zara noted with surprise, not locking it. The little girl looked up at her with wide, frightened eyes. "What's your name?" Zara asked gently, pouring water for both of them. "Lily," the child whispered. "Lily Peterson." "I'm Zara Newell," she said, helping the girl drink, "and I think we might be safe for now." But as she said the words, Zara wondered if anything in this wild territory could truly be called safe. The marshal returned an hour later, carrying a bundle under one arm. He placed it on the table: a dress for Zara, simple but clean, and smaller clothes that might fit Lily. "Town's got a small dry goods store," he explained. "These aren't much, but they're better than what you have." "Why?" Zara asked, her fingers touching the fabric of the dress cautiously, as if it might disappear. "Why help us?" Xavier Garrison removed his hat again and sat heavily in a chair, suddenly looking tired. "Because what happened to you was wrong. Because that child deserves better. Because I wear this star and it's supposed to mean something." He gestured to the silver badge on his vest. "Laws coming to these territories, slow but sure. Can't abide by men trading in human lives, not anymore." Zara looked at him skeptically. "You could have arrested them." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "With what jail, what court? The nearest federal judge is 3 days' ride from here. Sometimes the best law is the practical kind." He stood, moving to the stove. "I'll make some food. You two should wash up. There's a basin through that door, and I've got hot water on." As he busied himself with preparations, Zara helped Lily clean up first, using the warm water and soap he provided. The child's arms were marked with bruises, and Zara had to fight back tears as she gently washed the dirt from the girl's face. "Are we going to be all right?" Lily whispered. "I think so," Zara replied, though she wasn't entirely convinced herself. "The marshal seems different from the others." After getting Lily into the clean clothes, Zara took her turn washing. Her own body bore similar marks of rough handling, and her wrists were raw from the ropes. The warm water stung, but it felt like heaven to be clean again. When they emerged, the marshal had a simple stew ready. They ate in silence, Lily so hungry she could barely slow down enough to avoid burning her mouth. "Where are you from?" Xavier finally asked, looking at Zara. "Philadelphia," she answered. "I came west to be a governess for a family in Kansas City," he nodded. "And you?" he asked Lily. The little girl's eyes welled up. "My mama and papa had a farm, men came." She couldn't continue. "I understand," Xavier said quietly. "You don't have to talk about it now." After dinner, exhaustion overtook them quickly. Xavier showed them to the bed and trundle, then took a blanket for himself and settled into a chair by the door. "You're sleeping there?" Zara asked, surprised. "It's proper," he said simply. And you'll both rest better knowing where I am." As Zara lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to Lily's steady breathing from the trundle, she studied the marshal in the dim light of a single candle. He sat upright, his gun belt within reach, eyes closed but his posture suggesting he wasn't deeply asleep. For the first time in weeks, Zara felt something close to hope. The next morning, Zara woke to the smell of coffee. Marshal Garrison was already up, his hat and badge on the table as he worked quietly at the stove. Lily still slept soundly, her small face relaxed for the first time since Zara had met her. "There's a basin of fresh water," Xavier said without turning around, "and breakfast will be ready soon." Zara slipped from the bed, careful not to disturb Lily, and washed her face. The marshal had his back politely turned, giving her privacy. "What happens now?" she asked, smoothing her borrowed dress. Xavier poured coffee into 2 tin cups. "That depends partly on you." He handed her a cup and gestured for her to sit at the small table. "I've been thinking about it all night. The child Lily, we need to find out if she has any family left. As for you," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You have options, though they're limited. There's a women's aid society in Kansas City. I could arrange transport back there if that's what you want." Zara's hands tightened around the warm cup. "And if those men find me again," Xavier's jaw tensed. "There's that risk," he admitted. "What are my other options? You could stay here in the town. Mrs. Hollister at the boarding house needs help. Or there's the school teacher position that's been vacant for months." Zara looked up in surprise. "A school teacher?" "But I thought, this may look like the edge of nowhere," Xavier said with a hint of defensiveness, "but we're trying to build something here. Families are moving in, children need learning." "I was trained as a teacher," Zara admitted, "before I took the governess position." Something that might have been relief flickered across Xavier's face. "Then it's settled if you want it. And Lily, we'll send telegrams, see if she has kin somewhere. Until then," he looked at the sleeping child, "she stays with us." "Us?" Zara raised an eyebrow. Xavier had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Figure of speech. What I mean is, she stays safe, under protection." The morning light caught the silver of his badge, making it gleam. For the first time, Zara noticed the faint scar that ran along his jawline, disappearing into the collar of his shirt. "Why did you really buy us?" she asked suddenly. His blue eyes met hers directly. "I told you, it wasn't right. You could have stopped the auction altogether." "Used your authority," Xavier sighed. "In a perfect world, yes. But this isn't that world, not yet. If I'd tried to shut it down, there would have been shooting. People would have died, maybe including you and the girl. Sometimes the best way to fight evil is to redirect it, not confront it head-on." Before she could respond, Lily stirred, sitting up and rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, little one," Xavier said, his voice gentler than Zara had yet heard it. "Hungry?" The child nodded, still half asleep. As they ate breakfast eggs and biscuits that were surprisingly good, Xavier outlined his plan. He would take them to meet Mrs. Hollister, who could provide proper accommodations for Zara while the schoolhouse arrangements were made. Meanwhile, he would begin inquiries about Lily's family. "The town's called Redemption," he told them as they prepared to leave the cabin. "It's small, but the people are mostly good. Just keep close to me today. There'll be talk about what happened yesterday." He wasn't wrong. As they walked down the town's single main street, Zara felt the weight of stares from every porch and doorway. Lily clung to her hand, shrinking from the attention. The Hollister boarding house was a 2-story building with a wide porch and window boxes blooming with hardy prairie flowers. Mrs. Hollister herself was a plump woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "So you're the ones causing all the gossip," she said, looking them over. Come in, don't mind the busybodies." Inside, over tea and more biscuits, Xavier explained the situation. Mrs. Hollister listened without interruption, occasionally nodding. "The school teacher position, you say?" she finally asked, looking at Zara with new interest. "Well, that's something the town sorely needs, and the child can stay here too, of course." "I'll cover their board until things are settled," Xavier said. Mrs. Hollister waved away his offer. "Nonsense. The town council will pay for the teacher's lodging, as always, and as for the little one," she smiled at Lily, "I've raised 6 children of my own." One more around will brighten the place. As they toured the boarding house, seeing the clean, comfortable rooms where they would stay, Zara felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. This unexpected turn of events seemed too good to be true. "I'll leave you to get settled," Xavier said when the tour was complete. "I need to send some telegrams about Lily's family and speak to the town council about your position, Miss Newell." "Thank you," Zara said, the words inadequate for what she felt. "For everything." A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "Just doing what's right, madam." As he turned to go, Lily suddenly darted forward and caught his hand. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice small. Xavier knelt down to her level, his expression softening. "Of course I will. You're under my protection now, remember? Both of you." After he left, Mrs. Hollister showed them to their rooms, adjacent chambers on the second floor, simply furnished but clean and comfortable. "He's a good man, our Marshal," Mrs. Hollister said as she helped Zara put fresh linens on the beds. "Came here 3 years ago when the place was little more than a wide spot in the trail. Brought law and order, helped build the town up proper. He seems." Zara searched for the right word. "Different from what I'd expect out here," Mrs. Hollister chuckled. "Oh, he can be hard when needed. Seen him face down gun hands that would make most men quake. But there's education there and principles. Rumor has it he was a Union officer during the war, though he doesn't speak of it." That evening, Zara sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of gold and crimson. Lily had fallen asleep early, exhausted from the day's events. Footsteps on the wooden boards alerted her to someone's approach. She turned to see Xavier, his tall figure silhouetted against the fading light. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. Zara nodded, suddenly aware of her quickening pulse. In the soft evening light, away from the scrutiny of the town, she could admit to herself that the Marshal was a handsome man. "I sent the telegrams," he said, sitting down. "It might be a few days before we hear anything. And the school position, the council meets tomorrow. It's all but certain they'll approve your appointment. They're desperate for someone with proper training." They sat in silence for a moment, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Why did you really come west, Miss Newell?" Xavier asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. "I told you to be a governess." "There are governess positions in Philadelphia," Zara sighed, looking down at her hands. "I wanted something different, a new start, running from something." She looked up sharply, but there was no accusation in his eyes, only genuine curiosity. "Not in the way you might think," she admitted. "My fiancé died during the war. Afterwards, everything in Philadelphia reminded me of him. The future I had planned vanished, and I couldn't bear to stay and build a different one in the same place." Xavier nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling." Something in his tone made her wonder about his own past, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "How did you come to be here?" "A marshal in a town called Redemption." A faint smile touched his lips. "Looking for redemption, I suppose, like many who come west. And have you found it?" His blue eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. "I'm still looking." The next week passed in a blur of activity. The town council enthusiastically approved Zara's appointment as teacher, and preparations began to ready the small schoolhouse for the fall term. Meanwhile, Zara and Lily settled into life at the boarding house, gradually recovering from their ordeal. Xavier was a constant presence, checking on them daily, bringing news of his inquiries about Lily's family. The telegraph messages had gone out, but responses were slow to return. Zara found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. There was something compelling about the quiet Marshal, a depth beneath his reserved exterior that intrigued her. One afternoon, as she was organizing books in the schoolhouse, Xavier appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. "News?" she asked, setting down the primer she'd been examining. He nodded, removing his hat as he stepped inside. "About Lily. I've confirmed what we feared. Her parents' homestead was attacked by the same gang that took you. No survivors except Lily." Zara's heart sank. "No other family, none that we can find. Her father was the last of his line, according to records in Kansas City. Mother had a sister in St. Louis, but she passed 2 years ago. The poor child," Zara whispered. "What will happen to her now?" Xavier ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Zara had come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. Normally, in cases like this, the child would be sent to an orphanage in one of the larger towns. No, the vehemence in Zara's voice surprised even herself. She's been through enough trauma. I won't let her be shipped off to strangers. There's another option, Xavier said carefully. She could stay here in Redemption, be raised locally. By whom? Xavier met her gaze steadily. By someone who cares for her, someone who's already shown a willingness to protect her. Zara's mind raced. Me, but I've only just arrived myself. I have no home, no stability to offer. You have a position as the town's teacher. You'll have a salary, a place to live. The school comes with living quarters attached, small but adequate for two. I don't know the first thing about raising a child, Zara protested. You were a governess, Xavier reminded her, and you clearly care for Lily. She's attached to you already. It was true. In the short time they'd been together, Zara had grown fiercely protective of the little girl. The thought of Lily being sent away to an impersonal orphanage was unbearable. It wouldn't be easy, Xavier continued when she didn't respond. But you wouldn't be alone. The town would help. You mean you would help, Zara said, studying his face. A faint flush colored his tanned cheeks. I feel responsible for both of you. Zara walked to the schoolhouse window, looking out at the dusty main street. Redemption was nothing like the Philadelphia she'd left behind, but in just a week, she'd begun to see its potential not just as a place of safety, but as a home. I'll do it, she said finally, turning back to him. I'll take care of Lily. The relief on Xavier's face was unmistakable. I'll draw up the papers. It won't be a formal adoption at first, more of a guardianship, but in time if you wish. Thank you, Zara said, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of the decision she'd just made. Don't thank me yet, Xavier said with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. Wait until you've spent a winter teaching 20 frontier children while raising one of your own. His words should have terrified her, but instead, Zara found herself smiling back. For the first time since leaving Philadelphia, the future held promise rather than dread. The summer passed more quickly than Zara could have imagined. July blazed into August, and the small town of Redemption prepared for the coming school term. Word spread that a proper teacher had arrived, and families from outlying homesteads began making arrangements to send their children into town. The schoolhouse underwent a transformation. What had been a neglected building with broken windows and a leaky roof became, with the help of town volunteers, a proper place of learning. The attached living quarters were similarly renovated, with new curtains, a fresh coat of whitewash, and furniture donated by various townspeople. Through it all, Xavier was a steady presence. Though his duties as marshal kept him busy, particularly with increasing reports of the gang that had attacked Lily's family continuing to terrorize isolated homesteads, he made time each day to check on Zara and Lily's progress. It's looking like a real home, he commented one evening in late August, standing in the doorway of what would soon be Zara and Lily's new residence. Zara looked up from the quilt she was mending. It's coming along, still needs a woman's touch in places. Lily was already asleep in the small adjoining bedroom, exhausted from a day of helping Mrs. Hollister bake pies for the church social. I've been meaning to ask, Xavier said, removing his hat and turning it in his hands, another gesture Zara had come to recognize as a sign he was uncomfortable with what he was about to say. The guardianship papers are ready, but before they're finalized, there's the matter of your safety. Zara set aside her sewing. What do you mean? The men who took you, who killed Lily's parents, they're still out there, and they have a reputation for holding grudges. A chill ran through Zara despite the warm evening. You think they might come looking for us? Xavier's expression was grim. It's possible. They lost money on your sale because of me, and Lily's a witness to their crimes. What can we do? I've arranged for extra patrols around the school, and I'd feel better if you'd accept this. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small revolver, placing it on the table between them. Zara stared at the weapon. I've never fired a gun in my life. I can teach you, Xavier said. It's not something I suggest lightly, but out here, a woman should know how to protect herself and those in her care. The thought of handling a firearm went against everything in Zara's genteel upbringing, but the memory of rough hands and rope-burned wrists was still fresh. For Lily's sake as much as her own, she needed to be strong. All right, she agreed. When can we start? The next day, Xavier took them to a secluded spot outside of town. While Lily collected wildflowers nearby, he showed Zara how to load, aim, and fire the small revolver. "It's got a kick," he warned. "Brace yourself." Even prepared, the recoil surprised her, sending her stumbling back a step. Xavier's hand steadied her elbow, his touch sending an unexpected warmth up her arm. "Sorry," she muttered, embarrassed. "Don't be," he said. "Everyone starts somewhere. Try again." By the end of an hour, Zara could hit the broad side of a target most of the time. It wasn't expert marksmanship, but it might be enough to save her life if needed. As they walked back to town, Lily skipping ahead with her bouquet of prairie flowers, Xavier said quietly, "You did well today." "I still pray I never have to use it," Zara replied. "As do I." His gaze lingered on her face a moment longer than necessary. "But knowing you can protect yourself and Lily, it eases my mind." That evening, after Lily was asleep, Zara sat alone on the small porch of what would soon be their home. The schoolhouse was nearly ready, and they would move in before the term started in 2 weeks. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Xavier approached, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. "Evening, Miss Newell," he greeted her, the formality at odds with the growing ease between them. "I brought something for your new home." He handed her the package. Inside was a book, a beautiful edition of Tennyson's poems, its leather binding worn but well cared for. "Xavier, I can't accept this," she said, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "It's too valuable." "It's been sitting on my shelf gathering dust," he said. "Books should be read, not hoarded, and I thought, well, with you being a teacher and all." Zara opened the book carefully. Inside the front cover, an inscription read, "To my son Xavier, may these words guide you through dark times. Your loving father, 1861. "This was a gift from your father," she said, looking up at him. "I really can't, I want you to have it," he interrupted. "Please." Something in his voice made her relent. "Thank you, I'll treasure it," he nodded, seemingly relieved. "Well, I should make my rounds. Good night, Zara." It was the first time he'd used her first name. The sound of it in his deep voice lingered in her mind long after he'd disappeared into the darkness. The first day of school arrived with all the excitement and chaos Zara had expected. 23 children of varying ages filled the small schoolhouse, some having traveled from homesteads miles away to attend. Lily, now officially under Zara's guardianship, sat proudly in the front row, wearing a new dress Mrs. Hollister had helped sew for the occasion. As Zara called the class to order, she caught sight of Xavier standing outside the window, watching. When their eyes met, he touched the brim of his hat in a gesture of respect before continuing on his way. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their new life. Mornings began early, with Zara and Lily preparing for the school day. Evenings were filled with grading papers, preparing lessons, and the domestic tasks of their small household. Xavier visited regularly, often bringing small gifts, a jar of honey from a farmer whose children attended the school, a book he thought might interest Zara, a carved wooden horse for Lily. Sometimes he stayed for supper, his presence filling their modest quarters with a comfortable warmth that Zara found herself looking forward to more and more. October brought cooler weather and the first hints of autumn color to the prairie landscape. It also brought news that set the town on edge. "The Jenkins farm was hit last night," Xavier told Zara one evening after Lily had gone to bed. "Same gang from the descriptions. They're getting bolder, moving closer to town." Zara clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Was anyone hurt? "Jenkins got a bullet in the shoulder, but he'll live. They took his horses, some valuables, left his wife and children unharmed, thankfully." "What are you going to do?" Xavier's expression was grim. "What I have to. I've sent for help from the territorial marshal's office, but it could be weeks before they respond. In the meantime, I'm organizing a town watch." "Be careful," Zara said, unable to keep the concern from her voice. "These men, they're killers." "I know what they are," Xavier replied, a hardness entering his voice that she rarely heard. and they need to be stopped before anyone else gets hurt. The next day at school, Zara found it hard to concentrate. The thought of Xavier confronting the gang that had abducted her and murdered Lily's parents filled her with dread. As the children worked on their arithmetic, Zara noticed a rider approaching the schoolhouse at speed. One of the older boys saw it too. "Miss Newell," he called out. "Someone's coming fast." Zara's hand instinctively went to the small revolver she kept in her desk drawer. "Everyone remain calm," she instructed, moving to the window. Relief flooded her when she recognized the rider as Caleb Foster, one of the young men who helped Xavier with his marshal duties. "Miss Newell," he called, reining his horse to a stop outside. "Marshal says to get all the children to the church right away. There's trouble coming." Zara's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Children, we're going to walk to the church now." In an orderly line, just like we practice for fire drills. As they hurried down the street, Zara could see men taking up positions around the town, rifles at the ready. Xavier stood in front of the marshal's office, conferring with several others. When he spotted Zara and the children, he broke away, coming to meet them. "What's happening?" Zara asked, keeping her voice low so the children wouldn't hear. "Riders spotted heading this way, 6 of them. Could be nothing but after the Jenkins place." His blue eyes were intense with worry. "Get the children inside the church. Reverend Wilson and the women will look after them. Then I need you to go to our cabin and stay there." "I'm not hiding while you're in danger," Zara protested. Xavier's jaw tightened. "Zara, please, Lily needs you safe." At the mention of Lily, Zara relented. "Be careful," she said, touching his arm briefly. He nodded, then turned to address the children. "Everyone follow Miss Newell to the church. It's just a precaution, nothing to worry about." The children, sensing the tension despite the reassuring words, hurried along without their usual chatter. After delivering them to the church, Zara took Lily's hand. "We need to go home now," she said, forcing a smile. "Is something bad happening?" Lily asked, her small face serious. "Marshal Garrison is just being extra careful today," Zara answered, guiding her quickly toward their quarters behind the schoolhouse. They had just reached the door when Zara heard the sound of horses approaching from the far end of town, not the controlled pace of Xavier and his men, but the reckless gallop of riders with no respect for the law. Inside, Zara locked the door and moved to the window, peering cautiously through the curtain. What she saw made her blood run cold. 6 riders had entered the town, dust billowing around them. They were rough-looking men, heavily armed. And in the lead was a face. Zara recognized the wiry man with tobacco-stained teeth who had auctioned her and Lily months ago. "Get away from the window," she whispered to Lily, who had come to stand beside her. "Go to your room and hide under the bed. Don't come out until I call you." Lily, wide-eyed with fear, obeyed without question. Zara retrieved the revolver from its hiding place, her hands trembling slightly as she checked that it was loaded. Xavier had been teaching her to shoot regularly, and her aim had improved, but the thought of using the weapon against another human being still terrified her. Outside, she could hear raised voices. Xavier's deep tones carried clearly. "This is a peaceful town. State your business." The reply came in a sneering drawl. "Heard you got something that belongs to us, Marshal. A woman and a child. Took him without proper payment." "I paid what they asked." Xavier's voice remained calm. "The transaction was completed. Under duress," the man argued, "and anyway, we've reconsidered. Got a better offer for the woman from a gentleman in Kansas City who likes his ladies educated." Zara's stomach turned at the implication. "They're not for sale," Xavier said, his voice hardening. "Not now, not ever. I suggest you ride on while you still can." There was a moment of tense silence, then the sound of a gun being cocked. "6 of us, one of you," the leader taunted. "Those ain't good odds, Marshal. He's not alone." Another voice joined in Mr. Peterson from the general store. Then another and another as the townsmen made their presence known. Zara crept back to the window. Xavier stood in the middle of the street, facing the 6 riders. Behind him were at least a dozen men from the town, all armed and resolute. For a moment, it seemed the gang might back down. Then the leader's gaze shifted, scanning the buildings, and landed directly on the window where Zara stood watching. Their eyes met across the distance, and his face twisted into a malicious grin. Before Zara could react, he raised his pistol and fired. The window shattered. Zara dropped to the floor as glass showered around her. From her bedroom, Lily screamed. Outside, chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out, men shouted. Zara crawled to Lily's room, keeping low. "It's all right," she whispered, gathering the terrified child into her arms. "We need to stay down, away from the windows." The gunfire continued for what seemed like an eternity, but was probably only minutes. Then an eerie silence fell. Zara's heart pounded in her ears as she strained to hear what was happening. Footsteps approached their door, heavy boots on the wooden porch. She raised the revolver, pointing it at the door, her finger trembling on the trigger. A knock came, then Xavier's voice. "Zara, Lily, are you all right?" Relief made her dizzy. "We're here," she called back, lowering the gun. "We're unharmed." She opened the door to find Xavier standing there, a bloody gash across his forehead but otherwise whole. Without thinking, she threw herself into his arms, Lily clinging to both of them. "It's over," he said, holding them tightly. "They won't hurt anyone ever again." Later, after the town had calmed and the bodies of the gang members had been removed, Xavier explained what had happened. 4 of them are dead, including their leader. The other 2 surrendered. They'll be taken to the territorial court for trial. And the townspeople? Zara asked, applying a damp cloth to the cut on Xavier's forehead as they sat at her kitchen table. Lily had finally fallen asleep, exhausted by the day's events. 2 wounded, but Doc says they'll recover. It could have been much worse. Zara's hands trembled as she cleaned his wound. "I was so afraid when I heard the shooting." Xavier caught her wrist gently. "I promised I'd protect you both, I meant it." Their eyes met, and something changed between them, a barrier falling away, leaving only truth. "I can't lose you," Zara whispered. "Either of you." Xavier's hand moved to cup her cheek. "You won't." Their first kiss was gentle, a promise more than a passion. When they pulled apart, Zara saw in his eyes everything he couldn't yet put into words: devotion, admiration, and the beginning of love. The months that followed brought healing and growth to redemption. The school flourished under Zara's guidance, and the town expanded as new settlers arrived, drawn by reports of a community that stood together against danger. Xavier and Zara's courtship progressed with the measured pace of 2 people who had both known loss and were cautious with their hearts. They took Lily on picnics by the creek, read together in the evenings, and gradually built the foundations of what they both hoped would be a lasting happiness. By the time spring arrived, bringing with it a riot of wildflowers across the prairie, Xavier had become a regular presence in their small home. One evening, as Lily helped Mrs. Hollister with a church social, he arrived at Zara's door with an unusual request. "Would you walk with me?" "There's something I want to show you." Curious, Zara agreed. He led her to the edge of town, where a plot of land overlooked a bend in the creek. A foundation had been laid, and lumber stacked nearby indicated that construction was underway. "What is this?" Zara asked. Xavier took her hand, suddenly looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. "It's going to be a house. A proper one with 3 bedrooms, a study for your books, and a big kitchen." "Xavier." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. "Zara Newell, I never expected to find someone like you in this lifetime. You've brought light back into my world. I love you, and I love Lily as if she were my own. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, of making us a real family?" Tears filled Zara's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, with all my heart." Their wedding took place in June, exactly 1 year after Xavier had first seen Zara standing on that crude auction platform. The entire town gathered to celebrate, with Lily serving proudly as flower girl. As they exchanged vows in the small church, Zara marveled at how much had changed in a single year. She had come west seeking a new start and had found instead a new family, a community, and a love she had never thought to experience again. That night, after Lily had been tucked into bed in their temporary home, the new house was still under construction. Xavier took Zara's hand and led her onto the porch. "Happy?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she answered, leaning back against his chest. "Though I still can't quite believe it sometimes. How did we get here from that terrible day when they sold me at auction?" Xavier was silent for a moment, his breath warm against her hair. "I knew the moment I saw you standing there," he finally said. Something inside me recognized you, even then. When I said both sleep under my roof tonight, it wasn't just about keeping you safe. It was the first step toward making you mine. Zara turned in his arms to face him. I think I've been yours since that first night in your cabin when you slept in a chair to make me feel safe. His kiss was tender, a promise of all the nights to come. Above them, stars wheeled across the vast prairie sky, witnesses to a love that had begun in the darkest circumstances, but had bloomed into something beautiful and enduring. 5 years later, the Garrison house stood proud on its small rise overlooking Redemption, which had grown from a dusty outpost to a thriving town. A white picket fence surrounded a yard where flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds, and a swing hung from the branch of a sturdy oak tree. On the porch, Zara sat in a rocking chair, a baby nestled in her arms. At her feet, Lily, now 12 and growing into a thoughtful young woman, read aloud from one of the books Xavier had given them. The sound of a horse approaching made them all look up. Xavier rode into view, his badge still gleaming on his vest, but his face relaxed in a way it never had been when Zara first met him. "Papa's home," called a small voice, and 3-year-old James Garrison came tearing around the corner of the house, his dark hair so like his father's flopping across his forehead. Xavier dismounted, scooping his son up with one arm. "Have you been good for your mama today?" he asked, carrying the boy as he approached the porch. "I helped with baby Sarah," James announced proudly. "He did," Zara confirmed with a smile. "He's becoming quite the responsible big brother." Xavier leaned down to kiss Zara, then gently touched the sleeping infant's cheek. "And how's our newest addition doing?" "Growing stronger every day," Zara answered. "Doc Wilson says she's the healthiest baby he's seen in years." Lily closed her book and stood to give Xavier a hug. Though not his by blood, she had taken his name when he and Zara married, proud to be a Garrison. "How was your trip to the county seat?" she asked. Xavier ruffled her blonde hair, now worn in a single long braid. "Productive. The new circuit judge is a good man, and I brought something for you." He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a package wrapped in brown paper. "The latest from Mr. Twain. Thought you might enjoy it." Lily's face lit up as she accepted the gift. Her love of reading had only grown stronger under Zara's tutelage, and at 12, she was already helping with the younger students at the school. As the family moved inside for supper, Zara caught Xavier's hand, holding him back for a moment on the porch. "I've been thinking," she said, "about that day, if those men hadn't abducted me, if you hadn't been there at that auction." Xavier's blue eyes, still as intense as the day they'd met but now softened with love, held hers. "Some things are meant to be, Zara, no matter how dark the path that leads to them." She leaned into him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I never thought I could be this happy again." "Nor I," he admitted. "After the war, after all I'd seen and done, I thought that part of me was dead, until you and Lily came into my life." From inside came the sounds of their family, James chattering, Lily setting the table, baby Sarah beginning to fuss. The ordinary, precious sounds of the life they had built together. "We should go in," Zara said, though she was reluctant to break the moment. Xavier nodded, but before they moved, he pulled her close for one more kiss. "I love you, Zara Garrison, more than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied. "My Marshal, my hero, my heart." Hand in hand, they went inside to join their children, leaving behind the shadows of the past and walking together into the future they had fought so hard to create, a future built on courage, sacrifice, and a love that had begun with the simple, powerful declaration, "Both sleep under my roof tonight." In the years that followed, Redemption continued to grow, becoming a place known for its strong community and unwavering principles. Xavier eventually hung up his marshal's badge to serve as the town's mayor, while Zara divided her time between teaching and writing articles for Eastern publications about life on the frontier. Lily grew into a beautiful young woman who inherited Zara's passion for education and Xavier's sense of justice. She went east to attend a teacher's college, returning to Redemption with new ideas and a young doctor who would later become her husband. James and Sarah Garrison, born into the love their parents had forged from adversity, never knew the darkness that had preceded their family's beginning. But they grew up hearing stories of courage and redemption, learning that sometimes the most precious things come from the most unlikely places. And on quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the prairie wind whispered around their home, Xavier and Zara would sit together on their porch, watching the stars and marveling at the journey that had brought them together, a journey that began with an act of compassion on a dusty afternoon, when a marshal refused to let injustice stand, and declared that a woman and child would sleep under his roof that night.